My name is Ella, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a marketing executive here in Denver, and I've always been proud of what I've accomplished. Growing up, my parents taught me the value of hard work and family loyalty. They sacrificed so much for me, and when they needed help, I didn't hesitate to give everything I had. I spent months working overtime, sold my belongings, and emptied my savings to pay off their $400,000 house debt. I thought I was saving my family. I thought they would be grateful. I was wrong. The moment I handed them that mortgage satisfaction letter, everything changed. They looked at me like I was a stranger, and what they said next shattered everything I believed about family. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and while you're at it, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, what happened next will leave you speechless, so let's get started. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs earlier, but love makes you blind to the truth sometimes. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in the Denver suburbs with my parents, Margaret and Frank. Mom was 58 and had worked as an elementary school teacher for over 20 years before retiring. Dad, 61, spent his entire career as a mechanic until a back injury forced him into early retirement 5 years ago. Our house was always filled with love, even if money was sometimes tight. They were traditional parents who believed in hard work and education. Mom would stay up late helping me with homework, and Dad taught me how to change a tire and balance a checkbook. They weren't perfect, but they were my foundation. I threw myself into my studies determined to make them proud. I earned scholarships, graduated summa cum laude, and got my MBA from the University of Colorado. My career started modestly as a junior marketing associate, making $45,000 a year. But I climbed the ladder steadily. After 8 years of dedication, I became a senior marketing director at a growing tech company, earning $120,000 annually. I was finally living the American dream they had worked so hard to give me. I had a beautiful apartment downtown, a reliable car, and a healthy savings account. I was even planning to buy my own house within the next 2 years. But while my life was ascending, theirs was falling apart. Dad's back injury came with chronic pain and expensive medical bills. Mom developed arthritis that made teaching increasingly difficult, forcing her into early retirement at 56. Their income dropped from $70,000 a year to just $35,000 in Social Security and disability payments. The real disaster was their mortgage. Like so many Americans in the early 2000s, they had signed an adjustable rate mortgage when rates were low. What started as a manageable $2,800 monthly payment had ballooned to $4,200 when the rates adjusted. On their reduced income, it was impossible. I first learned about their financial troubles during Thanksgiving dinner last year. I noticed Mom seemed stressed picking at her food instead of enjoying the meal she had spent days preparing. Dad was quieter than usual, staring out the window instead of watching football like he normally did. When I asked what was wrong, they exchanged that look married couples give each other when they're deciding whether to share bad news. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and admitted they were struggling with the mortgage payments. They had already fallen 3 months behind, and the bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. My heart broke seeing the shame in their eyes. These were the people who had given me everything, who had worked multiple jobs to pay for my college textbooks, who had celebrated every promotion and achievement in my life. The idea of them losing their home was unthinkable. I immediately offered to help with the monthly payments, but they were too proud to accept at first. It took weeks of gentle persuasion before they finally agreed to let me contribute. I started sending them $2,000 every month to help cover the mortgage and other expenses. At first, I thought that would be enough. I was wrong. Over the next few months, the full scope of their debt gradually revealed itself. There were medical bills, credit card debts, and back taxes they had hidden from me. The total amount they owed on the house and other debts was staggering $400,000. I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to save their home no matter what it cost me. I started working overtime every day, taking on freelance consulting projects on weekends, and saying yes to every side job opportunity that came my way. I was determined to raise enough money to pay off their entire debt and give them the security they deserved. For 6 months, I lived like a monk, pouring every extra dollar into my parents' financial crisis. I had no idea that my sacrifice would soon become my biggest regret. The next phase of my plan required sacrifices I never imagined making. I moved out of my luxury downtown apartment and into a tiny studio that cost half the rent. I sold my reliable Honda Accord and bought a 10-year-old Toyota with high mileage but a lower monthly payment. I canceled my gym membership, streaming services, and even my morning coffee habit, making everything at home instead. But lifestyle changes weren't enough. I needed serious money, and that meant touching my long-term savings. I liquidated my entire retirement portfolio, losing $80,000 I had been building since my first job out of college. The penalties for early withdrawal were brutal, but I told myself it was temporary. I could rebuild once my parents were stable. When that wasn't enough, I took out a personal loan for $150,000. My credit score was excellent, so I qualified for a decent rate, but it still meant taking on massive monthly payments that would stretch me thin for years. My relationship with my boyfriend Jake started showing strain during this period. Jake was a software developer, practical and logical, and he couldn't understand why I was destroying my financial future for parents who, in his opinion, had made poor financial decisions. We had been dating for 2 years and had talked about moving in together, but my new financial situation made that impossible. "Ella, you're working yourself to death," he said one evening when I came home from my second job at 10 p.m. exhausted and barely able to keep my eyes open. "When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time you weren't stressed about money?" I tried to explain that this was temporary, that once my parents were stable, everything would go back to normal. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. My parents' expectations seemed to grow with each payment I made. It started with small requests. Mom called asking if I could help with the electric bill because it was higher than usual. Dad mentioned needing new tires for his car and wondered if I could contribute. These weren't unreasonable requests individually, but they added up to hundreds of dollars every month on top of my mortgage help. What bothered me more than the money was their attitude. Instead of gratitude, I started hearing criticism. Mom complained that my $2,000 monthly contribution wasn't enough to really make a difference. Dad suggested I should be giving them more since I had such a good job. The worst part was my younger brother Marcus. At 27, he was still living in their basement rent-free, pursuing his dream of becoming a professional musician. While I was working 70-hour weeks to save their house, Marcus contributed nothing. He didn't even help with household chores. Yet somehow he felt entitled to criticize my efforts. "You make 6 figures," Marcus said during one family dinner where I had mentioned being tired from working so much. $2,000 a month is like pocket change for you. Maybe if you actually cared about family, you'd do more." I was too stunned to respond. I was literally sacrificing my health, my relationship, and my financial future for their benefit, and it wasn't enough. The stress was taking a physical toll. I was gaining weight from stress eating and lack of time to exercise properly. I wasn't sleeping well, lying awake at night, calculating numbers and worrying about how to raise more money. I started having anxiety attacks at work, usually triggered by emails from my parents asking for additional help. My work performance began to suffer too. I was making mistakes I never would have made before, missing deadlines because I was distracted by side projects and falling asleep during meetings. My boss noticed and asked if everything was okay at home. By month 6, I realized I needed to make the final push. There was still $170,000 remaining on their total debt. If I could raise that amount, I could pay everything off at once and finally give my parents the security they needed. The only way to raise that much money was to cash out everything I had left. I withdrew my entire 401k, accepting massive penalties that reduced its value by almost 30%. I took out additional personal loans using my excellent credit one last time before my debt-to-income ratio made me ineligible for more borrowing. I was about to put myself in serious financial jeopardy, but I believed it was worth it. I thought my parents would be so grateful that our relationship would be stronger than ever. I thought they would see my sacrifice and love me even more for it. I couldn't have been more wrong about what would happen next. The day I made the final payment was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. I had spent weeks coordinating with the bank, gathering all the necessary documentation, and arranging the wire transfers. The total amount came to exactly $398,743.62. I remember sitting in the loan officer's sterile office watching her process the final payment. She kept double-checking the numbers because it was unusual for someone to pay off such a large debt in one lump sum. When she handed me the mortgage satisfaction letter, my hands were shaking with exhaustion and relief. I drove straight to my parents' house, barely able to contain my excitement. I had imagined this moment for months, walking through their front door with the news that they were completely debt-free, seeing their faces light up with joy and gratitude, sharing a moment of pure happiness as a family. I knocked on the door instead of using my key, wanting to make the moment special. Mom answered, looking surprised to see me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Ella, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at work?" "Mom, Dad, I have something for you," I said, pulling the envelope from my purse. "Could you both sit down?" Dad emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. They sat together on their old couch, the same one I had grown up curled up on watching Saturday morning cartoons. I handed Mom the envelope, my heart pounding with anticipation. She opened it slowly, unfolding the mortgage satisfaction letter. Her eyes scanned the document once, then twice. Then she looked up at me with confusion. "I don't understand. What is this?" "It's your mortgage satisfaction letter," I said, grinning. "The house is paid off. All of it. The mortgage, the credit cards, the medical bills, everything. You don't owe anybody anything anymore." The silence that followed felt endless. Dad took the letter from Mom's hands and read it himself, his lips moving slightly as he processed the words. Mom just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Finally, Mom started crying. Not happy tears, but overwhelmed, almost panicked tears. Dad remained silent, still reading and rereading the document as if he couldn't believe it was real. "How?" was all Mom managed to say. I explained everything: the sacrifices I had made, the loans I had taken, the complete liquidation of my retirement savings. I told them about the side jobs, the lifestyle changes, the 6 months of working myself to exhaustion to make this possible. For a brief moment, it felt like the family reunion I had imagined. Mom hugged me tightly, thanking me through her tears. Dad's eyes were wet as he shook his head in amazement, calling me incredible and the best daughter in the world. I suggested we celebrate with dinner at their favorite restaurant, My Treat. For one evening, everything felt perfect. We laughed, shared stories, and I felt like I had truly done something meaningful for the people I loved most. But the warm feeling didn't last long. Over the next few days, I started noticing changes in their behavior that made me uncomfortable. Instead of continuing to express gratitude, they began talking about all the things they could do now that they were debt-free. Mom mentioned wanting to renovate the kitchen, something she had been dreaming about for years. Dad talked about finally buying the motorcycle he had always wanted. Marcus, who had contributed nothing to the debt relief, immediately started making suggestions about converting the basement into a professional recording studio. When I gently mentioned that I was currently in significant debt because of helping them, their responses were dismissive. Mom said something about how adult children should help their parents when they can. Dad waved off my concerns, saying I was young and had plenty of time to rebuild. The most hurtful moment came when I asked if they could help me with my rent for the next couple of months while I recovered financially from helping them. I wasn't asking for much, just $500 to help cover my basic expenses while I worked extra hours to pay down the loans I had taken for their benefit. Mom looked at me like I had asked for something completely unreasonable. "Ella, honey, we just became debt-free. We can't start taking on new financial obligations right away. You're young and successful. You'll figure it out. It was in that moment I realized they didn't see my sacrifice as a gift. They saw it as something I owed them, something they deserved simply because they were my parents. The gratitude I had expected was nowhere to be found, replaced instead by entitlement and expectation. But I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. 2 weeks after paying off their debt, my parents had transformed into people I barely recognized. The brief period of gratitude had completely disappeared, replaced by an attitude of entitlement that shocked me to my core. Margaret called me at work on a Wednesday afternoon, interrupting an important client meeting. "Ella, we need to talk about your ongoing contribution to household expenses." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping into the hallway for privacy. "Well, just because the house is paid off doesn't mean our monthly expenses have disappeared. We still have utilities, groceries, insurance, maintenance costs. We think you should continue sending us at least $1,500 a month." I was speechless. Here I was, struggling to make minimum payments on the massive debt I had taken on to save their house, and they wanted me to continue giving them more money. "Mom, I can't afford that right now. I'm barely covering my own basic expenses because of the loans I took out to help you." Her response chilled me to the bone. Ella, family members support each other. This is what adult children do for their parents. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for what's right. Frank was even worse. When I visited that weekend, he showed me pictures of motorcycles he was researching online, asking my opinion about which one he should buy. When I reminded him that I was currently in debt because of helping them, he brushed off my concerns. "You chose to help us, Ella. Nobody forced you. And now that you've helped us get stable, we can start enjoying life a little. You should be happy for us." The word "chose" hit me like a physical blow. Yes, I had chosen to help them, but it was a choice born out of love and desperation to save their home. I hadn't chosen to become their permanent ATM. Marcus made everything worse with his constant manipulation. He had somehow convinced himself that my financial sacrifice was long overdue, and now he felt comfortable making demands too. "You know, Ella, now that the house is secure, it would be really nice if you could help me set up that recording studio in the basement. I've been looking at equipment, and I think $15,000 would cover everything I need to really launch my music career." I stared at him in disbelief. "Marcus, I don't have $15,000. I don't have $1,500. I'm in massive debt because I paid off Mom and Dad's house." He shrugged, completely indifferent to my financial situation. "You'll make more money. You always do. This could be a really good investment in my future." The breaking point came when I discovered their spending habits. I stopped by unexpectedly one afternoon and found the living room filled with new furniture. Mom was arranging fresh flowers in an expensive-looking vase, and Dad was assembling what looked like a high-end entertainment center. "Where did all this come from?" I asked. "Oh, we decided to do a little shopping," Mom said casually. "We haven't bought anything nice for the house in years, and now that we're debt-free, we can finally treat ourselves." "We also booked a cruise," Dad added proudly. 7 days in the Caribbean. We leave next month." I felt like I was going to be sick. While I was eating ramen noodles and walking to work to save on gas, they were buying luxury furniture and booking vacations. When I pointed out the irony of their spending spree while refusing to help me with basic expenses, their reaction was swift and defensive. "Ella, we worked hard our entire lives," Mom said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "We deserve to enjoy our retirement. Just because we had some financial difficulties doesn't mean we should live like paupers forever." Besides, Dad added, "You're the one who wanted to pay off our debt. We never asked you to sacrifice your lifestyle for us." That was a complete lie, and we all knew it. They had absolutely asked for help, had made me feel guilty about their situation, and had encouraged my ongoing support. But now they were rewriting history to make themselves feel better about their selfishness. The emotional manipulation reached a new level when I tried to set boundaries. I told them I couldn't continue providing monthly support while they were spending money on luxuries. I explained that I needed time to recover financially and asked for their understanding. Their response was to question my love for them. Mom suggested that I was being selfish and ungrateful for everything they had done for me growing up. She compared me to other daughters who supposedly took better care of their parents. "Maybe we raised you wrong," she said during one particularly painful conversation. "Maybe we gave you too much independence and not enough appreciation for family loyalty." Frank's approach was to make me feel guilty about their age and mortality. "We're not getting any younger, Ella. We don't know how many good years we have left, and you want us to spend them worrying about money instead of enjoying life." The manipulation was so skillful, so emotionally devastating that I began to question myself. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should be happy to continue supporting them indefinitely. Maybe this was what family really meant. But deep down, I knew something was fundamentally wrong with their expectations. I had given them everything. I had put myself in serious financial jeopardy, and instead of gratitude, I was getting demands for more. Instead of appreciation, I was getting criticism and manipulation. The situation was about to explode in a way I never could have imagined. The final confrontation happened on a Sunday evening in March. I had spent the entire weekend thinking about our relationship and had decided to try one more honest conversation about boundaries and mutual respect. I believed that if I could just explain my position clearly enough, they would understand, and we could rebuild our relationship on healthier ground. I arrived at their house around 6 p.m. carrying a speech I had written and practiced. I had planned to stay calm, stick to facts, and appeal to their sense of fairness. I thought I could make them see that love and support needed to flow both ways in a family. They were in the living room watching television when I arrived, surrounded by their new furniture and the vacation brochures spread across their coffee table. Marcus was there too, playing guitar in the corner, completely absorbed in his music and oblivious to the tension in the room. "Mom, Dad, I was hoping we could have a serious conversation about our relationship and how we move forward from here." Mom muted the television and looked at me with barely concealed annoyance. "If this is about money again, Ella, we've already discussed this. We're not going to feel guilty for enjoying our debt-free life." "It's not about guilt," I said, sitting down across from them. "It's about respect and appreciation. I spent 6 months sacrificing everything I had to save your home. I emptied my retirement account, took out massive loans, and put my own financial future at risk. I'm not asking for your money, but I am asking for acknowledgement of what I did and some understanding of my current situation." Frank shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Look, Ella, we appreciate what you did, but you're acting like we forced you to help us. You made your own choices." "You're right, I did make choices," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I chose to help you because I love you and couldn't bear the thought of you losing your home. But those choices came with real consequences. I'm now $220,000 in debt because of helping you. I work 70 hours a week trying to manage the payments. I can't afford to help you with additional expenses right now." Mom's response was immediate and harsh. "So what do you want from us, Ella? Do you want us to feel sorry for you? Do you want us to give up our cruise and go back to living in fear about money? We raised you, fed you, and clothed you for 18 years. We paid for your college textbooks and helped you through graduate school. Now that we need some support in our retirement years, you're counting every dollar like we're strangers." Her words hit me like a physical blow. "Mom, what you did for me growing up was called parenting. That's what parents are supposed to do for their children. But what I did for you was above and beyond anything children are obligated to do for their parents. I saved your home from foreclosure with money I didn't even have." Marcus finally looked up from his guitar, adding his voice to the attack. "She thinks she's better than us now because she makes good money. She thinks we should be grateful forever, just because she helped out one time." One time. I stood up, my carefully planned calm beginning to crack. "Marcus, I worked 2 jobs for 6 months. I liquidated my entire retirement savings. I took out loans that will take me years to pay off. I sacrificed my relationship with Jake because I was so focused on helping this family. and you contributed absolutely nothing while living here rent-free. I'm pursuing my music career, Marcus shot back. Not everyone can sell their soul to corporate America like you did. That's when I lost my composure completely. I sold my soul, I worked my way up from nothing to build a successful career, and then I used that success to save this family from financial ruin. And instead of gratitude, I get lectures about family obligation and accusations that I'm selfish. Frank stood up, his face red with anger. You know what, Ella, maybe you are selfish. Maybe you did help us for the wrong reasons. Maybe you wanted to feel superior to us like you were the successful one who had to rescue her poor parents. The accusation was so unfair, so completely opposite to my actual motivations, that I felt something break inside me. Are you serious right now? You think I destroyed my financial future because I wanted to feel superior? You think I worked myself into exhaustion because I wanted to show off? Well, why else would you bring it up constantly? Mom demanded. Every conversation we have, you mention the money, the sacrifices, the loans. It's like you're keeping score, like you want us to be in debt to you forever. I bring it up because you keep asking me for more money, I shouted, abandoning all pretense of staying calm. You want me to continue paying your expenses while you go on cruises and buy new furniture. You expect me to fund Marcus's recording studio while I'm eating ramen noodles to afford my rent. Nobody forced you to live beyond your means to help us, Frank said coldly. That's when everything exploded. Margaret jumped to her feet, her face twisted with rage, and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Get out!" I stood there in stunned silence, unable to process what I had just heard. Frank joined in, immediately pointing toward the front door like I was an intruder in their home. "Get out of our house!" Both of them were yelling simultaneously, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of rejection and anger. Margaret's finger was pointed directly at me like I was some kind of criminal. Frank's face was red with fury as he gestured aggressively toward the door. Marcus just sat there with a smirk on his face, making no attempt to defend me or calm the situation down. If anything, he seemed to be enjoying watching his parents throw me out. I looked at these people who I had sacrificed everything for, who I had loved unconditionally my entire life, and I realized they didn't see me as their daughter anymore. They saw me as an ATM that had malfunctioned, a source of money that had become inconveniently demanding of respect and appreciation. "Get out!" Margaret screamed again, her voice cracking with the intensity of her rage. I walked to the door in complete silence, my hands shaking as I picked up my purse. I turned back once, hoping to see some sign of regret or recognition of what they were doing, but they just stared at me with cold anger until I stepped outside. The door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed through my entire body. I sat in my car in their driveway for 20 minutes, crying harder than I had since I was a child, unable to believe that the people I had sacrificed everything for had just thrown me out of their house like a stranger. But as I drove home that night, something else began to grow alongside the devastation, a cold, clear anger and a determination to show them exactly what they had just lost. The first 72 hours after being kicked out were the darkest of my adult life. I called in sick to work and spent most of Monday crying in my tiny studio apartment, replaying every moment of that awful confrontation. I kept expecting them to call to apologize, to realize they had made a terrible mistake. My phone remained silent. Jake came over Monday evening after I finally returned his calls and told him what had happened. I had never seen him so angry on my behalf. "Ella, what they did to you is unforgivable," he said, holding me while I cried for what felt like the 100th time. "You saved their house and they treated you like garbage. No real family would ever do that to someone who sacrificed so much for them." On Tuesday, I called my best friend Sarah, who happened to be a family law attorney. I needed someone with legal expertise to help me understand my options and rights. Sarah had been skeptical of my parents' behavior for months, but even she was shocked by how the situation had ended. "Ella, what happened to you is a form of financial abuse," she said during our long phone conversation. "They manipulated you into giving them everything you had, then discarded you when you tried to set reasonable boundaries. You need to protect yourself legally and financially. That conversation was the turning point. Sarah helped me understand that while I couldn't force my parents to pay me back the money I had spent on their debt, I did have options for protecting myself moving forward. More importantly, she helped me see that their treatment of me was objectively wrong, not just something I was being sensitive about. I spent Wednesday researching and documenting everything: bank statements, loan documents, payment records, and a detailed timeline of events. When I saw the numbers laid out clearly, the scope of my sacrifice became undeniable. I had spent exactly $400,237 saving their house and covering their additional expenses over 6 months. My current debt load was staggering $220,000 in personal loans and credit cards, not including the massive early withdrawal penalties from my retirement accounts. At my current salary, it would take me at least 7 years to pay everything off, assuming I could maintain my strict budget and avoid any financial emergencies. But the documentation process also revealed something that gave me a powerful tool: leverage. Through mutual friends and family connections, I learned that my parents had been bragging to everyone about being debt-free. They were telling people they had raised such a successful daughter and that they were so proud of how well Ella was doing. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They were using my success as a source of pride while simultaneously treating me like an entitled burden when I asked for basic respect and acknowledgement. That's when I decided to take action. If they wanted to use my story for social credit, they were going to get the whole story. I crafted a detailed social media post explaining exactly what had happened without naming my parents or providing identifying details. I shared the financial specifics, the timeline of events, and the way they had treated me after I paid off their debt. I ended the post by asking if others had experienced similar family financial abuse and how they had handled it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the post had been shared hundreds of times. My inbox filled with messages from people sharing their own stories of family financial manipulation and exploitation. Many people expressed outrage at how I had been treated and validation that my parents' behavior was completely unacceptable. The post went viral within 3 days. It was shared on Reddit, picked up by several family finance blogs, and even caught the attention of a local news station that was doing a series on adult children supporting their parents financially. The journalist wanted to interview me about the growing trend of sandwich generation financial abuse. But the real impact came when the story started reaching people in my parents' social circle. Their neighbors, church friends, and extended family members began asking pointed questions about the situation. The narrative they had been spreading about their successful, generous daughter began to unravel when people learned the full truth. Marcus called me first, panicked about the attention the story was getting and worried about how it might affect his living situation. "Ella, you need to take down that post. People are asking Mom and Dad uncomfortable questions, and they're really upset about it." "Good," I replied calmly. "Maybe now they'll understand what it feels like to be uncomfortable and upset." My parents' attempts to contact me started the following week. First came text messages with half-hearted apologies that focused more on asking me to fix the situation than acknowledging what they had done wrong. When I didn't respond, they escalated to voicemails that ranged from guilt-tripping to outright manipulation. But I had learned something important during my week of documentation and reflection. Their power over me had always been emotional, and I was finally free from caring about their approval. The viral post had connected me with a community of people who had experienced similar situations, and their support gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking care of myself instead of trying to manage everyone else's emotions and expectations. The consequences of their actions were finally catching up with them, and I was no longer willing to protect them from the natural results of their choices. The healing process didn't happen overnight, but it began with a single powerful realization: I deserved better than what they had given me, and I had the right to demand that better treatment. My parents' attempts to reconcile continued for several weeks, but every approach they took revealed that they still didn't understand what they had done wrong. Their apologies focused on the argument itself, not on the months of manipulation and entitlement that had led up to it. They wanted me to forgive them so they could return to the comfortable dynamic where I gave and they received without question. "Ella, we miss you," Mom said in one particularly manipulative voicemail. "We know we said some things in anger, but family should stick together through difficult times. Can't we just put this behind us and move forward?" The phrase, "put this behind us," was telling. They wanted to sweep away their behavior without addressing it, apologize for the explosion without examining the selfishness and entitlement that had caused it. Marcus's mediation attempts were equally transparent. His motivation wasn't reconciliation, it was self-preservation. With me out of the picture, there was no backup plan if our parents encountered future financial difficulties. He was also facing questions about his own role in the family dynamic, and people weren't impressed with his contribution of zero while criticizing my sacrifices. "Look, Ella, maybe everyone could have handled things better," he said during one phone call. "But don't you think you're being a little dramatic about this? It's not like they committed a crime or anything." "You're right," I replied. "What they did wasn't criminal. It was just cruel, selfish, and completely inconsistent with how people who love you should treat you." The boundary I set was simple but firm, no contact, until they demonstrated genuine understanding of how their behavior had been wrong and made concrete changes to show that things would be different. I wasn't asking for money or grand gestures. I was asking for basic acknowledgement and respect. They never met that standard. Their efforts at reconciliation remained focused on getting me to return to the old dynamic rather than building a healthier relationship. Meanwhile, my life began to improve in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant stress of managing my parents' emotions and financial demands, my work performance recovered quickly. My boss, who had noticed my struggles during the previous months, was impressed with my renewed focus and energy. Within 4 months, I received a promotion that came with a $15,000 salary increase. Jake and I grew closer through the crisis. Watching him support me unconditionally while my family treated me terribly clarified something important about the difference between people who genuinely care about you and people who only value what you can provide them. We moved in together 6 months after the confrontation, splitting expenses and creating the stable, supportive partnership I had always wanted. The financial recovery was slow but steady. I consolidated my loans, negotiated better interest rates, and created a strict but manageable budget that would eliminate my debt within 5 years instead of 7. The viral story had connected me with financial advisors who specialized in helping people recover from family financial abuse, and their guidance was invaluable. But the most important change was internal. For the first time in my adult life, I learned to prioritize my own well-being instead of constantly trying to manage other people's happiness. I started therapy to understand how I had become so susceptible to manipulation and to develop better boundaries for future relationships. The therapy process revealed patterns I hadn't recognized before. My parents had always used emotional manipulation to control my behavior, but it had been so subtle and consistent that I had mistaken it for normal family dynamics. Learning to identify guilt-tripping gaslighting and emotional blackmail helped me understand why the financial situation had escalated so far beyond reasonable bounds. My story also began helping other people in similar situations. I started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that provided resources for adults dealing with family financial abuse. The work was personally healing and professionally rewarding, giving me a sense of purpose that my corporate job had never provided. A year after the confrontation, my parents made one final attempt at reconciliation. They sent a long letter acknowledging that they had made mistakes and asking if we could start fresh. But even in their apology, they demonstrated that they still didn't understand the fundamental issues. They apologized for hurting my feelings, not for treating me like an ATM. They regretted the argument, not the months of entitlement and manipulation that had preceded it. I wrote back once, clearly explaining exactly what they would need to acknowledge and change for me to consider rebuilding a relationship with them. I never received a response. The silence that followed was initially painful, but it eventually became peaceful. I had given them every opportunity to demonstrate that they valued me as a person, not just as a source of financial support. Their inability to meet that basic standard told me everything I needed to know about their priorities. 2 years later, I can honestly say that cutting ties with them was one of the healthiest decisions I ever made. The family I've built with Jake, the deep friendships I've cultivated with people who value mutual respect and support, and the sense of self-worth I've developed through therapy have given me a richness that their conditional love never could. I don't regret helping them when they were in crisis. Even knowing how they would treat me afterward, I would still choose to save their home, because that choice reflected my values and character, not theirs. But I deeply regret accepting their mistreatment for as long as I did and allowing their manipulation to nearly destroy my own financial future. The most important lesson I learned is that real love requires mutual respect, and family relationships shouldn't be exempt from basic standards of decency. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who refuse to treat you with the respect you deserve, even if those people happen to share your DNA. Today I'm debt-free again, my career is thriving, and I'm surrounded by people who genuinely care about my well-being. I've learned to recognize manipulation before it takes hold, and I've built a life based on mutual support, rather than one-sided sacrifice. Sometimes people ask if I miss my parents, and the honest answer is that I miss the parents I thought I had, not the people they actually were. I miss the idea of unconditional family love, but I don't miss the stress, manipulation, and emotional abuse that came with trying to maintain relationships with people who saw me as a resource rather than a daughter. The final irony is that by cutting them off, I probably saved them from themselves. Without me as a safety net, they were forced to develop actual financial responsibility and independence. According to mutual friends, they're doing fine financially, which proves they never really needed my ongoing support in the first place. As for me, I've learned that the most important family is the one you choose, built on mutual respect, genuine care, and the understanding that love is something you give freely, not something you're obligated to provide, regardless of how you're treated in return. So let me ask you, what would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to hear your perspectives on this difficult topic. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and personal growth. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve to be treated with respect and appreciation no matter who is treating them poorly. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how much you can give to others, but by how you stand up for yourself when it matters most. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.